So I wanted to put together a video about the stuff that I'm building for Clayno.club, specifically surrounding Popkins and pods and peer-to-peer trading and all that stuff that I thought the community could benefit from. And I started working on this probably a couple months ago. This was before the Popkins mint, and it's taken quite a while to figure out sort of like how all these pieces play together on SUI, how best to use the architecture, how to index data, which has been the most challenging part by far. Yeah, so before we dive into this, like the two tools that I just mostly want to shout out to DGen Ballboy for some of the new art here on the tools page. It's pretty fire. It are the Popswap, which is basically like Foxy Swap, except for SUI. Specifically, this is for Popkins. So this is kind of like it actually would work for all NFT collections, but right now I'm just only supporting Popkins for this. And then the other one is Podify, which was an idea I had after Popswap. But basically, the concept here is, and some of you probably have experienced this, but when you have a wall with a lot of Popkins, it's just kind of a mess because you have this kiosk system on SUI, which is a little bit mysterious and difficult to understand exactly how it works. So I thought I would sort of discuss a little bit about that and how that works. And this is just as an example, the wallet here, you can see like the different kiosks. You'd think they'd be just NFTs in your wallet, but no, in fact, they're in these kiosks. And it's a bit confusing for sort of a newcomer, but there are benefits to this, which I'll go into a little bit here. So kiosks. So if you minted your Popkins, this is what they would look like. So you would have one Popkin that's in a kiosk by itself. And so Popkins are objects. That's the thing to remember on SUI is like everything is an object, is an entity that can be nested within other objects. It can be interacted with by other objects, that kind of stuff. So the Popkins specifically are, if you look through the ownership history on the Explorer, if you've ever done that before, you're going to see that your Popkin is actually owned by another object, which is called the dynamic field. This dynamic field is basically, think of it just like just a variable or like an empty container you can put other stuff inside of. And then that dynamic field, if you look up the owner of that, you're going to see that it's owned by one of these kiosks. And then if you look up the owner of the kiosk, you should see your address. There's some caveats here because sometimes it'll show that the original Clayno mint address is the owner of the kiosk. But I'll go into the details of that in a minute. So basically, this is kind of messy. There's no reason why why you need to have one Popkin in a kiosk like this. They actually are designed to be able to hold as many objects as you want. So the idea with Podify is really to allow people to start like organizing these tools. So you can take your Popkins from these other kiosks and you can put them in a new kiosk together. So then you have the dynamic fields that come with these. So then you have a more organized structure. It'll enable some other things that we can do on chain that'll be interesting for having pods like all together, and you can separate your collection into these sort of organized logical groupings. And I think that interesting, or the thing that people don't necessarily understand about kiosks is these kiosks are what are referred to on SUI as shared objects. So you don't actually own your kiosk. Kiosk is basically the best analogy that I have for it is it's like a vending machine in an airport. It's like a public good. Anybody can interact with the machine. They can purchase items from the machine. They can view what's in the machine. The thing is like you're the only one who can actually open the machine, claim the money from selling the goods in there is the person who owns this key. It's called a kiosk capability object. If you've ever looked into your item details on like the SUI block explorer, you might have seen something called like a kiosk cap before. And this is sort of like a hidden item that the user doesn't really need to interact with, but it is what signifies that you're the owner of the kiosk. If you own the vending machine, you have the keys to unlock the vending machine. You can restock the vending machine, you can put items in it, you can set prices, you can withdraw profit. But only the person with the keys is restricted to just the rules of the kiosk shared object, which is mostly the ability to just view items and purchase anything that gets listed. So that's sort of an important distinction, and that's what I wanted to just mention real quick, and I'll get into a little bit more about that in a second, but I wanted to show you how Podify works here. So if you go to, so yeah, from the community tools page, you go to Podify and you connect your wallet. I'll disconnect real quick so you see it. So you just need to connect your wallet, and keep in mind this is like Clayno.club does track wallets aggregated through the inventory page. These tools are really on-chain tools, so that's going to just only show you the Popkins that are in a specific wallet. So, okay, so here we have, so on Popkins here, these are all kiosks. They're labeled as unorganized, but these are all individual kiosks. So each Popkin is in its own kiosk, with the exception of Tradeport, where you see I've labeled them differently here because Tradeport kiosks have some different rules that work a little bit differently than normal kiosks. I won't really get into that, but just be aware of that. So, and over on here, the left here, you have kiosks that have more than one Popkin inside of them. So you can see I've already sort of arranged some pods here into different kiosks, and I'll go ahead and show you how this works. It's pretty straightforward, but so you can select your Popkins, and then you can choose. These are the Popkins you're going to be moving into a kiosk. So I could say I want to move it to this kiosk by just clicking on the destination. You can also move them into an existing kiosk with another Popkin. So in this case, I'm selling this like amethyst stripe herd, and I want to throw them in the kiosk with this Diplox here. So I want to put all of these into here. You can mix types, so it should be able to handle if the Tradeport kiosk or regular kiosk. You can do all of that. So you can see I have the 4 selected here. My kiosk destination is the one I have checked here, the Diplox. I'll go ahead and hit the button here to prep the transaction. This often does take a couple seconds, but you should see a bunch of object changes that pop up, and depending on what wallet here, I'm using the Slush wallet, but you should see all the Popkins being moved. So there's the Snarlfin, Rat, there's the Squib, and then the Luma right there. So looks pretty good. If I go ahead and hit approve, password in, you should see a success message, and then you should see the Popkins pop up in your kiosk here. Chain doesn't actually impact that quickly. I'm using like optimistic updates, so I'm assuming that it'll end up in the right place. And on the back end here, you should. So I just pulled up in the terminal here, so you can see all these logs happening right now. So this is actually the indexer. So this was the most difficult part, and why it's taken so long for me to release these tools is figuring out the data indexing part here. So basically, this is like a tool that grabs all the checkpoints from Sui blockchain. So every single checkpoint as it comes through, and it scans all those and looks for all kiosk events. And then if it finds one that contains a Popkin object, it does some analysis on that and updates the ownership, moves the Popkins from one kiosk to another in my database, so that you end up with sort of a more reliable system, because tracking these kiosk transfers is by far the most challenging part of this whole exercise. So there you go. You can see you have your pod assembled here. You can also move them between pods. So if I wanted to say, I don't know, I want to move my 2 dodos. I want to put them with my slug army here. So I can say, I can just select those, choose destination, and you can see there's the dodos, hit approve. And then, yeah, my dodos have moved to this Kia. So you can really do whatever you want this in terms of organization. And one of the main impetuses for doing this in the first place was just kind of how some of the lessons learned from like the herds on Solana. So on Solana specifically, there's a very specific rule set that I had to stick to when designing like the algorithm to automatically detect all these herds. So basically, it scans your wallet, it looks for like combinations, and it tries to predict what the user has done, right? And then eventually I decided that wasn't sufficient enough, because there's always edge cases, there's always users who want to do something differently. So I ended up building the ability to like create your own herds, right? So you could create herds. And some of you might ask, like, okay, why don't we just do that for Popkins as well? Good question. We could do all of this Popkin organization sort of off-chain, and you could just have a site like this where it just sort of logically groups things. But the fact that we're on Sui, and Sui provides some of the tools that let us do these on-chain, could provide some like really interesting utility cases, I think, down the line. So that was really the main motivation for me to do that. And the other one was the fact that like all this herd scoring and ranking is based on a very particular set of trait combinations. So pretty much a herd is defined as having one of each species. With you get the bonus sagas and the bonus dictyl, and you have matching skin color and background, and that's kind of how all herds are assembled, right? But that's not the only way to collect. And by having all these sort of on-chain tools, we can let people collect in any way they want. So if you want to be just like you want your pod to just be cat slugs, then yeah, that's fine. You can do that, and that can all be rewarded later by the achievement system in different ways. We can come up with sort of just different modes of collecting, so that's kind of a little bit more dynamic. But then, so the next thing here is once you've assembled your pods into a kiosk, you want to be able to track which ones are the user has intentionally designed to be a pod, right? So you don't really want, for instance, like if you just have a bunch of Popkins in a kiosk, we don't want to showcase that as a pod, right? Because it's just like, okay, random Popkins, that's not that interesting. But if you have assembled like a full pod, I ended up building what's known as a kiosk extension, which is basically just a object that goes in your kiosk that flags it be able to interact with this extension. And really all I'm using this extension for is just event. I'm indexing an event, so when you enable this extension, it'll flag it for tracking within like the pod system. So here I have my Aqua Nocturne pod that I have two incorrect backgrounds for. I'll go ahead and enable extension. So you can put in a little description. And this can be anything you want. You don't have to be like, oh, okay, it's Aqua Nocturne pod. You could literally put a message in here. You could name it. You could say you want to sell it. You could put a price in, kind of whatever you want. So there's just a 100-character limit. So that's really the only restrictions. So yeah, okay. So you hit enable pod extension. Pretty simple transaction pops up here. You won't see any like Popkins being moved or object changes. You're just enabling this extension. So go ahead and do that, and then the indexer on the back end is watching for events to enable that extension. So here you can see one pod extension event, pod enabled, just a bunch of data associated with that. So it's like creating pod in the database. And then, kind of similar to the herds page, if you come over to the pods page, you should see it pop up. So then this is kind of similar to how the herds worked previously. You can sort by users. You can see I have one pod here. I can go ahead and let's say I want to enable this one. This is the Aqua Arrow pod I've been trying to build. Enable that one. And it'll take a second. But it should pop up here. And there we go. So yeah, the backend processed it, assembled the pod, and then you can once this extension is enabled, you can move things in or out of it if you want. So just for example, if I wanted to move one pod into another, and this is the trickiest part, is being able to track these events, these kiosk events. So here, I moved a pot, I moved one from one to the other, and it should update on the front end here as well. So you can see it messed up my pod. I no longer have matching traits across. This is no longer Aqua Nocturne, now just Aqua, because this is an arrow skin, and this one is still Aqua Arrow. So that's all good. You can also at any time, if you want to hide your pod, you don't want to show it anymore on the front end, you can just come in here and just hit disable. And the same thing, it'll just go ahead and delete that, and it'll no longer show up here. I'll have to implement some rules just because the likelihood is people will forget to do this and you'll end up with some like really random pods, but I'll have to, as long as like there's sort of strict trait matching rules, we should be able to have sort of a nice inventory of all the pods. And this is fully searchable and everything, so, and I might adjust these traits a little bit, but you'll have like rat pods, full pods, you'll be able to look up all the colors and skins, the different combinations that match and yeah, and then some sort features, rarity, that kind of stuff. So okay, so I know that was kind of long-winded. Apologies for that, but I've spent so many times refactoring and building this tool to make it sort of seamless, and I hope that you guys are willing to at least experiment with it. These are all very common. The kiosk transfer methods, there's no custom smart contract involved with this tool, except for the kiosk extension. These are all just like the same tools or the same transactions that get built when you interact with Tradeport. Okay, so that's Podify. And then I wanted to talk about a little bit about Popswap as well. So Popswap was like the original plan. Podify was an idea that came later, but Popswap was like, okay, we're launching these Popkin collections. It seems like a nightmare to trade things on Sui because nobody knows how these kiosks work. There's these very strict rules where the Popkins have to be in the kiosks, and moving them out to other and trading them atomically with someone else without having to pay royalties is like sort of again. So lots of complexity there, but I wanted to build something that the community could use to trade with each other. And it's actually honestly hasn't been necessary. I don't know if it's because of the price point, but we haven't had any incidents with this. It seems everyone's happy to sort of trust each other, trade with each other peer to peer. So I don't know how much use this will get, but it does work. So I wanted to come back to this little kiosk illustration. So okay, so let's say this is one person, and they have this is their kiosk. That's great. This is that person's kiosk, and here's their key, their kiosk capability key. So they can do stuff with this kiosk. They can move pop kiosks, they can list them, whatever. This is person B's kiosk, this pink one here. So originally the idea was like, okay, like we need to figure out how to put these Popkins into some sort of escrow contract in the center here that that you could then use to set up the trade, right? So this person maybe wants to trade this Popkin for this Popkin, they'd go in here and then swap. But that doesn't work super well just because of the way these kiosks are set up. So you would need your escrow contract would need to be some sort of smart contract that could hold other kiosks, and it just became like kind of a mess. So eventually, though, I discovered these keys, and it occurred to me like, why are we trying to move these Popkins or these kiosks are shared objects? Like nobody technically owns them. The condition of them on chain, even if we were to move Popkins between each other, is the same. It's still the same kiosk. So instead of like trying to move these the Popkins between the kiosks, why don't we just trade the kiosk keys, right? So these kiosk keys are actually objects owned by the users that can be moved from one account to another. So PopSwap works exactly like that. So basically what we do is there's like you set up the trade, and for right now you can only trade one Popkin for one Popkin at a time. So you can basically, what you would do is you would move you would move the Popkin to its own kiosk, get rid of the stuff. And then you would just set up the trade. So the proposer would select this Popkin that they want to move. They would submit that to the smart contract, which there actually is a smart contract for this one here in the middle. And they would set up the trade, and they would deposit their kiosk capability key into the smart contract. And then the counterparty, the person you want to trade with, assuming that they accept it, would also similarly set up their kiosk with their requested NFTs, and then they deposit their key into the smart contract. And as soon as both keys are detected and both parties have agreed to the exchange, it automatically swaps. So this person would get the key for the other kiosk, and then this person would get that key. So you would have effectively changed hands. So the person on the right now owns this kiosk, the person on the left now owns this kiosk. So And that's actually fine, because again, kiosks, you don't own the kiosk, you own the keys to the kiosk. So that's how Popswap works. So I'll go ahead and show you sort of the UI flow here. So I'm going to trade with myself. So you just put in the trading partner. If they have an account already on Clayno.club with their socials linked, it'll pop up here for demonstration purposes. Let me show you. Let's get Swivel's account. So I grab his owner address here and pop that in. You see you're trading with Swivel Draw. You still have to put in the address because I wanted to prevent anybody from being able to spoof. Like if you were to type in Swivel and there's like some imposter Swivel, I don't want people to be sending things to the wrong address. So it's still ad space, but this is just like a nice little verification extra. Okay, so Swivel wants let's say he wants one of my Cheshire cat slug. Right now, let's give him this one. It's one of my favorites, the Nocturne Charcoal cat slug. So when you click on these, you'll notice that there's a little process that happens here. This is to verify that the NFTs are in a kiosk by themselves. So if they're not by themselves, for example, my auto herd here, you can see it says kiosk contains 9 NFTs. For trading, move it to a dedicated kiosk. So actually, it might be better if I go ahead and show you how that works. So I'll do that. So you can hit prepare for trading. This is actually just going to set up a new kiosk with just this cat slug in it. So you can see it's moving the cat slug. And then it says ready. So you should be good to go for now. If you want to add any SUI to the exchange, so if I want to add one SUI in exchange for whatever I'm gonna take from Swivel here, and I want his one of these rats. So okay, so I've selected, this is now the counterparty's Popkins, and I've selected, actually I know he likes this one, I want this Cheshire cat, okay. So I've selected that, and you can see it's all set up, so it should be good to go. You hit trade, you can put in a little message, give me the slug, and there is a fee that I've implemented for this. It's a 1 SUI fee that's really just designed to help pay for like some of these features. There's kind of expensive to run all these servers. It's not going to come anywhere near covering the expenses, but just as a sort of a way to produce a little bit of revenue. So you'll see here it's 2 SUI. That's because there's a fee of 1 SUI, and I am I'm offering plus 1 SUI to the cat slug trade here. So we'll go ahead and hit approve, and comes back to the main page here, and you scroll down to trade proposals. You see yours. You can see your proposal to Swivel Draw. There's the cat I want, plus the SUI, the description. You can always come in here at any time and cancel the proposal. So I'll go ahead and do that just to show you. So you get your SUI back, including the fee, and it gets canceled. So that's how the main flow would look like. I'll trade with myself, so you can see how it works as a counterparty. Let's go ahead and select anything here. Let's find one that's not already in a pod, so I don't have to set up a new kiosk. There we go. Okay, so let's say I want one of these gobblejaws. Go ahead and create trade, 1 SUI fee. And then I'll go ahead and switch accounts to counterparty. Okay, so here you should see the proposal being requested to me. So you can see proposal from Decay. Wants these. Go ahead and hit continue to acceptance. The kiosks that the contents are correct. So go ahead and hit accept trade. And in the object logic, you're not going to see any Popkins move here again because we're not moving Popkins. We're just trading those keys. So you should see one of these should show you the kiosk cap. There you go. So kiosk owner cap. So you're basically submitting that to the smart contract along with the parameters of the trade. So you hit approve, and that both deposits the counterparty assets and atomically executes the swap itself. So now you should be the owner of the other person's kiosk key, essentially. And then after you, as a counterparty, you're going to see this pop up. This is like an indexing issue that I haven't fully been able to solve yet because it seems like it's not a problem on my side. Basically, the contract updates the kiosks, and like there's this owner field on the kiosk that gets set, but for whatever reason, when you do like a lot of events in the same swap, the indexer doesn't get pick this up. So on Tradeport, it might look like the other person owns both Popkins, but that's actually not the case because it's only based on who owns the key. So if you just go ahead and hit yes, this is like an extra event that you can go ahead and to help the indexer pick up the fact that you're the new owner of the kiosk. So you just go ahead and do that. And then our events detector on the back end here should have picked up the Popswap transaction here. This is the kiosk indexer. This is okay, yeah, so the event indexer. Yeah, Popswap found one new events. Swap executed event processing. So that updates the database and everything. So when you return to this page, you should see that you have the proper NFT in your inventory. So here you can see should have, maybe I might need to refresh. I'll happen occasionally with sort of the database caching, but should see after refreshing, yeah. So now I have that snarlfin that was sent here as part of the trade. So an important thing to note this is at the moment, just out of an abundance of caution, restricting this to just one-for-one swaps. But because of how this is architected, there is absolutely no reason later on, like once this is more well tested and people are more comfortable like using this tool, that you can do full pod for pod swaps. So you can definitely be able to trade keys and have the owners between these two pods switch. So you'll be able to like trade not just one Popkin peer-to-peer, but entire pods peer-to-peer if you want. And you could even take it further than that. Like there's no limit space because you're only trading the keys. You could have 100 Popkins in a kiosk and you could trade it for someone else's 100 Popkins. So that makes it like really dynamic and flexible for the future. So I'm gonna leave it. We'll see how it goes. This Popswap just as one for now, and then later on I'll probably enable the ability to like you literally just be able to click on a pod, say you want to trade it for someone else's pod, and to go ahead and do that. So yeah, that's pretty much the main things I wanted to cover. One thing to note is, and what I've spent a ridiculous amount of time on, is tracking these keys. So these damn keys are really hard to find because these kiosks, like it's easy to find the Popkins, right? So I know where all 25,000 Popkins are, and I can find the dynamic field that they reside in, and then the kiosk that they reside in. But then these kiosks have these owner fields, but they're not always accurate. For example, let's say I'm trying to track the ownership chain of this Popkin. So I go to the SUI Explorer, you look up the Popkin. So here's Popkin. The parent object is a dynamic field, as you can see here. So you look that up. It says dynamic fields, and then the parent object of that dynamic field should be the kiosk, and you can see that here. So this is the kiosk. This is one of Swift's kiosks. You can see his name all over the place here with the stuff he's been doing on chain. And then if you go over to fields, you can see that the owner has this owner address here, but this is not always accurate. So you cannot trust that this owner actually owns this kiosk, which is the most ridiculous thing ever, but that is how it works. This is like a convenient feature. So the true owner of the kiosk is the holder of the key. But there's no reference to the key on the kiosk. So tracking these keys is challenging because the only way to do it is to look up, either find a transaction where the key was created or the kiosk was mutated such that you can find the key that did the mutation. Therefore, you know who owns the key, and you can confirm on the key that key owns this kiosk, but you cannot confirm from the kiosk side what the object ID of the key is. So that's been an adventure, but I think I finally have the proper system set up to be able to manage all of that stuff. And then lastly, you guys have probably already seen the Fusion tool. This is basically just like a new version of the old collage maker that lets you sort of assemble these pods however you want, just for share on Twitter, do whatever you want with. It's pretty flexible. You can add all kinds of rows and columns. You can do overlapping. You can add more assets here, like if people have certain things they want to see on the display, but you can like put an overlay here if you want the Popkin logo in your collage. But so yeah, so that's pretty straightforward. You just hit create video and then you come over to the process tab and you can see all the different videos and you can download them, whatever. There is like a limitation. You should be able to like fill up this grid for the most part, but my server only has so much RAM, so I can't process like 200 Popkins at the same time. You'll see that huge grid that Swift did. He did each species in a grid of like 5x5 or something, and then he stitched them together using some other tool. But then lastly, we're on the inventory page. So if you're on your own inventory page, and you won't see this when you visit other inventory pages, but you should see when you mouse over the Popkins, you should see this little lightning icon in the top right-hand corner. So this is the tool just to like send Popkins to each other. So use Swift as an example again. If I come down, let's say I want to send them this nice Diplox here. Click on here. It says, okay, I'm a wrong wallet connected. Popkins owned by a different wallet, so connect to the proper wallet. Go here, connect, and okay, no more errors now. So if I want to transfer to another wallet, I put in Swift's address here, it validates his address, pops up here, and then you can say transfer from kiosk. So this is just if you don't want to pay the 1 SUI fee, you just want to like doing direct swaps, might be a little bit easier than using Tradeport directly. So you can go ahead and I'm not gonna actually send this to him, but you can see that it's going to. So cool. Yeah, that's pretty much all I want to cover. I know this was a ridiculously long video, so apologies for that. I'll try to clean it up a little bit in post here, but this is not really my making demonstrations or fancy videos is not really my forte here. So, all right, appreciate it. Let me know if you guys have any questions, if there's any bugs, issues you encounter as you sort of like play around with these tools. Don't go crazy. I know this is the first time that Clayno.club is really ever offering any on-chain mechanics. So I do appreciate there are risks involved. Should be aware that the Popswap contract is not audited. So if you're not willing to use it, that's totally your prerogative. I've spent a lot of time making sure that it's secure and that there aren't going to be any major issues, but you never know. This is crypto at the end of the day, so totally understand all of that. So yep, that's it.